Hey everyone! So I haven't made a video in a while and I feel a little bit like shaky and all over the place, so you're just going to have to bear with me because it never ceases to surprise me how quickly I can fall out of the rhythm of this. I'll be honest with you, this video is a little bit late because ideally I would have filmed and uploaded this about a month ago, but because I've been having like university exams that have changed to like being online exams because of the current lockdown situation, I didn't get a chance to fully sit down and like plan this video out. So I'm sorry if it's a little bit late, but I figured because it is UCAT season at the moment, and I know that because I'm getting a lot of messages and emails from you guys asking me about it, I thought better late than never. And because I have a number of other more, I guess, informative UCAT videos, this is going to be more of a chatty one today, but because I've got a couple of more informative videos coming up, I thought I will upload this first, and then the other ones should be out in the next couple of days, so stay tuned for those if you're interested. So as you've probably seen by the title, today I want to talk to you about my own personal UCAT result and just generally my thoughts, some of the mistakes I've made and my experience with it. In case any of you guys are new here, my name is Atousa and I am going to be starting my second year of graduate entry medicine in September. And that's at the University of Birmingham. So for the past year, I have just had the first preclinical year of medicine, and September is going to be the first time that we are going to actually go into hospitals and start our placements, which I am both really excited for and really nervous for. Anyway, I digress. I have been on this YouTube channel for 4 years now, and the majority of the videos I've been making have been around basically documenting my journey towards getting into medicine. So I have spoken about UCAT and other admissions tests in the past. And if you are interested in me going through the actual process, like in real time, then I will link those videos below. And actually, before I forget, I do want to say that I checked this morning and I have just reached 30,000 subscribers, which just blows my mind, and I just want to say a really big thank you for those of you who have been around and have been following this journey. And also a big hi to all of you who are new. So thank you for that, first and foremost. And secondly, as I said, one of the reasons I want to talk to you about UCAT is because I have been receiving a lot of messages and emails from you guys asking me specific questions to do with the UCAT. So I do want to answer a couple of those. And I also want to say that I am sorry if I haven't gotten to your message personally. As I said, because I've had exams and all of that sort of stuff going on, I've been like kind of like in my own little bubble a little bit. So hopefully if you ask the questions that I didn't get around to answering like directly, then maybe this video will answer some of them for you. So for those of you guys who haven't sent messages in, let me give you a bit of context as to the kind of things I generally tend to get asked. I think if I had to narrow it down, the top 3 UCAT related questions I get are, firstly, this is what my UCAT is predicted. Is this good enough for such and such uni? That's number 1. The second question is, what UCAT scores or what's the range that I need to get into such and such uni? And by far, the most common question that I get asked is, do you have any tips or advice for UCAT? And I want to answer those questions in this video, but let me just start off with the last one first. Do I have any tips and advice for doing well on the UCAT? Yes, I have plenty of advice, theoretically. And I say theoretically because the giant elephant in the room is that I myself did not do that well in my UCAT at all. And I did make a video about it at the time, opening my results and sharing with you what I got and how I felt about it. And if you haven't seen that, I'll insert a quick clip here. I've literally just got back from doing my UCAT, and this is literally like fresh off the grill news. I thought I will literally, as soon as I've arrived home, I will get my sheet of paper, conveniently folded, and tell you what I've got. So, it's not good. It's definitely not good, but if I've noticed anything from watching lots of UCAT videos is that most people who share their results have done very well, and I made myself the promise that no matter what grades I got, no matter how, I guess, you know, not quite so proud I was of them, that I was going to share them with you anyway because I think it's important. So that clip was just 2 years ago, I believe. And although I managed to get into my course anyway, Birmingham University, the graduate course that I'm on now, at the time of me applying, didn't require any admissions tests or UCAT exam. In fact, I think Birmingham and Cambridge were the only two universities that I came across when I was going through my application process that didn't want any kind of admissions. And I remember I couldn't apply to Cambridge because they strictly required you to have an A in A-level chemistry, and I got a B. So Birmingham was literally my only, I guess, viable option. Pretty much every other graduate entry university, or even just your standard 5-year medicine course, most of the universities that I looked at had UCAT. And the ones that didn't, I think they had BMAT or GAMSAT, which is one of the postgraduate admissions tests. So really, Birmingham was my only option, and through some force and will of nature, I managed to get in. Now, I am genuinely sad and heartbroken to say this, but I think the last time I checked the Birmingham website, I think they have started requiring students to have a UCAT exam, which is such a shame because I know a lot of students struggle with the exam, and I know it's one of the only things that holds them back in terms of their application. So that is a real shame. And I'll be honest, that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I'm making this video today, because I wanted to talk to you about some of the mistakes I made, and hopefully you guys can learn a bit from that. Because I can tell you right now, with the information that I had at the time, and with the mindset that I was in at the time of sitting my UCAT, there would be no way for me to do well enough to be able to get onto any sort of graduate course. And I think with Birmingham, it was the case of getting in just on the merit of my grades and experience and all of that sort of stuff. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much why I'm making this video, so that you guys can hopefully have the best possible chance of doing well enough to secure your place at medical school. Now, one of the main points that I want to speak to you about regarding doing well in a UCAT is to try and find the right resources for you. And while this video isn't a sponsored video, I have made some videos in the past working with certain companies whose tools and whose features I genuinely believe in and do think are helpful. But I want to preface this video by saying that if you don't have access to those tools, if you, whether it's like by financial means or some other means, you don't want to use them or you don't have access to them, that's fine. I just want to be completely clear with everybody that if I do speak about certain companies or certain books or things like that, don't ever think that not having access to those things will hold you back. And in fact, if anything that I'm saying right now resonates with you, and you may think to yourself, I want to be able to get access to more resources, but I haven't got the means to at the moment, the first piece of advice that I want to start this video off with is look for places that can offer you that support. And what I mean by that is that I would highly encourage all of you to try and seek out certain free resources. I haven't Googled any myself, but I think if you maybe have a little search around, you might be able to come across certain things that will be useful for you. And also, don't hesitate to speak to your college or to your school about whether they have certain bursaries or certain amount of funds, I guess, set aside to help students get access to these. So I guess that's what I would begin this video on, and say that seek out the tools if you think they are going to be helpful for you. But equally, don't let people tell you that you need to have a certain book or a certain tool to do well, because from the number of people that I've spoken to, I know that's not the case. So don't let that hold you back. Number one. So to begin with my personal list of things that I could have done differently, or the mistakes that I made. I guess segueing nicely from the point that I just made, I personally did not use the right resources that worked for me. When I got started with my UCAT practice, I started with this the 1250 questions book. I think you must have seen it everywhere, like everyone and their grandma and their aunt and their cousin has a copy of it somewhere. And I started with this book because I was just told that it's a really good resource. But for me, it really did not work that well. And the main reason for that is that I learned later, power of hindsight, that the biggest issue I had was with timing. And when I was going through the book, I remember going through the questions and saying to myself, well, you know what, I'm just going to forget about time and then just focus on getting these questions right. And once I'm comfortable with answering the questions correctly, then I can start timing myself. And I think that really shot me in the foot, really, or I shot myself in the foot, I should say, because one of the biggest skills with UCAT is to be able to triage questions. And if you come across a question, if you can't do it, you just flag it, move on, and try and get through everything else. But because I got hooked on this idea of, right, I have to solve this question before I can move on, I remember I would spend maybe like 15-20 minutes on like one question, and I would have like pages and pages of notes on how to solve like this, like, I don't know, like any other questions, like for example, abstract reasoning. I would be like sat drawing shapes and to try and get my brain around it. When really what I should have done is just to go flag, move. And related to that point, another reason why that was such a big issue for me is that I had dedicated myself like a certain number of weeks to practicing, and the majority of that time that I had dedicated was spent doing this book method. So by the time that I actually started using certain online resources or even doing the mocks, I was so burnt out because I was so out of practice with timing and triaging that I just developed this feeling of apathy of, oh, well, I'm never going to do well enough. This is just hard. I'm just not one of those people who gets it. And I remember it must have been maybe like a week before the date that I had set for my exam that I had completely given up. Like mentally, I was like, yep, I'm done, I've checked out. And I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think that feeling of apathy that I felt could have been avoided if right at the beginning of my prep, I would have made certain adjustments. And if I noticed that the book method wasn't working for me, then I would have switched quicker to something that did. It could be the other way around for you. For example, the book method could work for you perfectly, but you need to find that out for you. Now, the second reason that I definitely shot myself in the foot and a big mistake I made with the UCAT is not taking into account how much time I would need personally to prep. Now, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I remember at the time, I was hanging out with a friend of mine who was studying graduate medicine, and he introduced me to like a course friend of his, and she was like, oh, you know, it's fine. It only took me 2 weeks to prep for the UCAT and I got like 800 and something. You don't need more than that. And not only is that terrifying because, wow, I'm so impressed by you, but also I didn't ask the question of, well, when you say 2 weeks, do you mean like 2 weeks solid? Like, are you doing 8 hours of prep a day? Do you mean you do like an hour every day for 2 weeks? I didn't ask those questions, and even if I had asked those questions, I think what I failed to realize is that everyone's different and people need more and less time depending on them and their style. So for me personally, because I heard a couple of people saying, oh yeah, you know, I only spent 2 weeks on it, you don't want to fatigue yourself, you don't want to over prepare, all of the things that I was hearing at the time, I thought to myself, okay, well, I'll give myself like 4 weeks, you know, it's a bit more than 2 weeks, but that should be okay. And this was at a time when I was working full time, so I couldn't spend that much time on UCAT anyway, and every time I started to prep, I became apathetic and I was just tired. The whole thing was a mess, basically. And it's really, really silly of me because comparing myself to other people's standards really did do me a lot of damage. Because not only did I not feel prepared for it and I didn't feel like I was doing that well, but it was also really difficult to see other people get it really easily, I guess. Whereas I didn't see the amount of work that they were putting in. I was just taking their word of, oh, it only took me 2 weeks. So I guess similar to my last piece of advice, I would say personalize the time for you. If you do a couple of practice exams and you see that you don't need to do that much prep and you're still coming up with really high scores, then that is good indication for you that maybe you don't need to set aside that much time. Whereas if you're someone like me and you do a couple of prep exams and you have a full-blown existential crisis because you're like, this is so low, then if that's you, don't panic. It just means that you have to plan a little bit better and you have to set aside more time. And now we get on to point number 3 of why I don't think I did that well. And this is probably the biggest mistake or the biggest thing that held me back if I had to choose. And that is that I had such a negative attitude towards this exam. And I remember at the time when I was going through the rest of the application process, I saw UCAT not as a part of the application process, but I looked at it as something that was getting in the way. Which is really dumb, really, because the fact that I looked at the UCAT as getting in the way is the same as me being like, ugh, if it wasn't for getting my A-levels and writing a personal statement and getting work experience, if it wasn't for all of those things, doing the application would be so easy. You see the flawed logic in that? What I failed to see at the time is that whether I like it or not, this is still part of the process. And if I go into it with the attitude of, ugh, this is just dragging me down, then I'm never really going to want to put in the effort. Because honestly, getting work experience, writing my personal statement, even like practicing for exams and stuff, like for the grades that I needed to get, all of those were a joyous process. Not an easy process, but a fun one. But UCAT was always something that I looked at very negatively, and that definitely did alter my performance and the attitude I had to practicing, which, you know, ultimately is what you need to do to be able to do well. And do you know, if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I still have a bit of a, let's say, complicated relationship with the UCAT. Because although I'm about to start my second year of medicine, I'm here, I made it through the nightmarish process that was the application, and the ups and downs of, you know, is it going to happen for me? Is it not? Do I have to wait another year? Even though I got through all of that and I'm still here now, when I think about the UCAT, there's still a part of me that thinks, does the fact that I didn't do that well in it say something about me as a medical student? Just because, like, you know, even though I'm here, just because I didn't get like 800s and 700s like some of the friends that I did, even like, you know, 650 or whatever, does that make me less of a good medical student? I don't know. There's that little bit of a, I guess, niggling voice and a bit of an insecurity that is still there at the back of my mind, and I think I need to find a way to work through that, if you like. And actually, if any of you guys feel this way, whether you're in the process of applying or you have already got into medical school, do you guys relate to this? Because let me know if you do, so at least it'll make me feel a little less alone, I guess, in my own thoughts and my own insecurities with it. So I guess if I had to give you guys any sort of practical advice, it would be to work on your mindset. And I know that doesn't seem as easy of an advice as use this resource or do this thing or do that thing. If I had to narrow it down for myself personally, and I realise, I guess all of you guys are different, but for me personally, I think my biggest mistake and my biggest barrier was not developing, I guess, a healthier mindset towards the exam. And this rings true for a lot of other things as well, not just UCAT, but I mean, for example, you could have like that one module in chemistry that you absolutely hate, but, you know, you kind of have to do well enough in there, I guess, to be able to proceed to the next step. Anyway, I think what I'm trying to say is that because I had this really awful mindset about the UCAT, there was a part of me that thought, well, if I just don't try and I just kind of be a little bit apathetic and I don't put in that much effort and I fail, it'll be a less, I don't know, like a less harsh blow to my ego than if I put in my everything and still didn't do well enough. So I think the whole mindset thing does tie into a bit of like self-sabotage and me leaving things till late and, you know, not chasing certain things up when I should have done. And I'm sharing all of this with you now because, you know, some of you might not be able to relate to this at all, but I would like to think that at least a handful of you might experience the same thing. Because for me, UCAT became this kind of like fear that I felt was a direct barrier to me getting my place. So if you find yourself in that pattern, I hear you. It's not a very nice place to be in because for me personally, it just felt like this mental tug of war. But I wanted to share all of this, I guess, personal experience with you because if I could go back and say something to myself, my past self, is, you know, you either do well or you don't, and you either get into medicine or you don't. It doesn't mean that you can't try. It doesn't mean that you won't get there eventually. So take a bit more risks. Try, if you can, to be less fearful about your outcome and try and just tuck into the actual process and the practice a bit more. Actually, that was very waffly. If I had to narrow it down, this is what I would say. I would say, don't focus on what your score is going to be. Focus on enjoying the practice and doing the practice for the sake of practice, rather than, oh my god, I have to do this practice because if I don't get 800, then I'm never going to be a doctor. I hope that makes sense. So if any of that does resonate with you, let me know below. And finally, I said at the start of this video, which honestly feels like years now, but I said at the start of this video that I get two other really common questions and I want to briefly address them. So the first question, as I said, is you guys sending me your predicted scores and telling me if it's good enough for a specific uni, or you guys asking me what requirements certain universities have. So for these questions, I'll be honest with you, there is literally no way for me to know enough about universities and about all of the different scores to give you guys an accurate answer. and I don't want to give you an information off like something I read like 2 years ago. So my go-to piece of advice is literally Google it. There will be charts that tell you like the list of the universities and the average UCAT scores that previous applicants have had. So if you just Google it and find that, that should give you an indication on what kind of scores you need. That's number one. And the second thing is if you still have specific questions, I would highly encourage you to write a quick paragraph explaining your situation. So you could say, hi, my name is this, these are my A-level grades, I've got this experience, and these are my predicted scores. And send it to the university admissions and say, do I have a chance? What are my chances? And they will be the people who will be able to give you the most accurate and the most up-to-date piece of advice. And do you know what? It's their job to help you, so milk it for all you can. And finally, as I said, I do have a couple of extra UCAT videos coming up, and I have got a couple of older UCAT videos as well on my channel. So I will link those below, as well as my Instagram, if you guys want to reach out and have a chat. But I think that's it. I think that's everything that I wanted to say on this. I hope it has been useful, and I hope you have resonated with some of it, and I would love to hear your thoughts as always. So leave a comment below if you feel inclined to, but otherwise I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys in the next one.